Sup nerds, Schrodinger's Kitten here, bringing you the easy way to defeat Penance using attack only. I'll link the video in the description where I defeat Penance the hard way, but it's not necessary to have seen that video before watching this video. This is also based on a video series by Dansko8 where he goes through the entire Final Fantasy X game using attack only, which I'll also link in the description. So just like last time, I have not done a full playthrough using attack only. I've used a save editor, but I've only given myself items and equipment that I know it's possible to get used on an attack only playthrough, and obviously all I'm allowed to do in battle is attack. In terms of what rules we can change to make this easier, if you have seen the last video, you'll know that one of the big problems we were facing was putting together an armor that would work for both Phase 1 and Phase 2 of this fight, because what you need to do well in those phases is quite different. So we could allow switching armor. Switching armor is something that the game lets you do, but that feels like an action that isn't attacking. Your character goes on a cooldown. It feels like more like taking an action than what I'm going to allow, which is just switching characters. We can have different characters wearing different armors, and we can switch between them. The game doesn't seem to really count that as a separate action. The character that switches in doesn't go on any kind of cooldown. They can take an action immediately. There's also actually precedent for this. Any attack-only playthrough will quite early on encounter Sin's Finn on the SS Leaky after leaving Besaid, where since Finn, as you're fighting it, is at a distance from you, you need ranged attacks to hit it, and your starting party in that fight is forced to be Yuna, Kimahri, and Tidus, none of which have ranged attacks, so you're forced to switch in Wakka. So any attack-only playthrough that's gone to Penance has inevitably switched characters at least once, which I feel creates a precedent that it's not so much cheating to allow character switching. That also brings up an interesting point, since now we're allowed to potentially use our whole party in this fight, and they're all going to want to use their celestial weapons. Is Yuna's Nirvana allowed? I feel yes. For those of you that don't know, the reason this might not be allowed is because of Belgemine. In order to fully unlock Yuna's celestial weapon, you need to have defeated all of Belgamine's Aeons and sent Belgemine. And you have to use Yuna's Aeons in that fight, so you have to summon, which is an action that isn't attacking. Now, in my opinion, the game is forcing you to summon in that fight, therefore it's allowed. There are other instances where the game forces you to summon, but there's a counter-argument, which is that the game doesn't force you to enter that fight. You could stick more strictly to attack only by simply avoiding that fight entirely. I'd kind of counter that, certainly by this stage of the game, summoning puts us at a serious disadvantage, especially if we use attack only with the summon. I'd much rather do the fight with my characters, but you know, the game doesn't let me do that, so I'm forced to have this extra hindrance of summoning, and that's kind of how I see it. If you see it differently, that's fine. You can absolutely do this fight without Yuna, but it will be a bit more tricky than what I've done here. And with that said, the fight against Penance attack only is now kind of easy. Well, not easy. You still need a lot of strategy, and you still need to be paying attention and carefully considering who's switching when we're attacking the arms, when we're attacking the body, planning all the armors that we're going to wear. But in terms of, well, comparing it to last time, in the RNG side of things, we have a better than 50% chance that the RNG will allow this fight to be winnable. So there's not so much of the resetting if you plan well and you play well. So before I go into the strategy, if you are someone who's done an attack-only playthrough of Final Fantasy X, and you came to this video to figure out how to defeat Penance, I'd suggest leave it there. Take that rule set and see what you can come up with, because from here on out, it's actually really fun to do yourself. And only come back and watch the strategy section if you get stuck, or after you've defeated Penance and you want to see how I did. Okay, so strategy. Let's start again with what hasn't changed. So, again, we still can't take a Judgment Day. There's no way we can survive a Judgment Day. We have no access to Auto Life. We have no access to Shield Aeons. So a Judgment Day will cause a game over every single time it happens. So we need to be able to attack fast enough to keep the arms down so that there's only ever one arm alive at any given time. That means everybody that's going to fight needs to have haste on their armor. We can still only use up to 2 auto haste armors because that's all you can ever possibly get in an attack-only playthrough. One from farming Dark Mindy, one from customizing the Chocobo wings you get from the Monster Arena. But also in this fight, because we have so many characters that can potentially help out, our SOS haste armors are probably limited as well. I believe you can only customize 4 or 5 SOS haste armors using Chocobo feathers that you can get from doing a normal attack-only playthrough. And let's be honest, you've probably used a bunch of them on other armors that aren't going to be exactly what we need right now anyway. Fortunately, we can farm SOS haste armors, but they only have 3 slots. There's a Fiend from Macalania that drops 3-slot SOS haste armors. So for anybody that can't have a 4-slot SOS haste armor or an auto haste armor, they're going to need to take a 3-slot, and we're going to need to think carefully about what we give them and maybe use them not so much. Now, as I alluded to earlier, the key to this fight comes down to separating out what you need for phase 1 and what you need for phase 2. And that's not to say the two can never mix and nobody can ever be involved in both phases of the fight. In fact, most characters will be at least somewhat involved in both phases of the fight, but you kind of want your team that's particularly good in phase 1 and your team that's particularly good in phase 2. So let's start with phase 1. Obviously, everybody still needs to have some kind of haste, and then the best possible armor for phase 1 is SOS haste, break HP limit, auto protect, and auto potion. Now, this will rely on selling all your potions except X potions, so that you're healing with X potions every time you take a hit and take damage, meaning you'll essentially take almost no damage per hit in phase 1, which is excellent. This person can be in and taking hits every time. If you can have 2 people like this, that would be ideal, but also there's a good chance you don't have too many X potions kicking around by this stage of the game, and farming them in an attack-only playthrough is horrible. You've either got to keep tying your best time over and over again in the wobbly chocobo minigame, or I think you can do a blitzball league for maybe 2 X potions because it's the top scorer prize. Both of those options are awful, so yeah, probably don't do that. And if you've got sort of, 15, 20 kicking around, you can probably have 1 person with armor like this. If you've got more like 30, 40, you're good to have 2. Or, if you've got tons, have 3. Great. But assuming you do only have 1, then you're probably going to want someone with the second best armor for phase 1, which is specifically auto haste, break HP limit, auto protect, and auto regen. This is also really strong, not quite as strong as somebody using auto potion because the HP will gradually slip down over time, but this person can also take maybe 15, 20 hits if you give them a break here and there for extra regen. Now let's say you've only got enough for 1 auto potion armor and 1 auto haste armor. That's absolutely fine. Don't worry too much. The 3rd slot on the front line for the first phase, you can generally have people swap in and out of that. Like all of your characters will be able to take a hit or 2 without dying, assuming they have break HP limit on their armor. Anybody that has auto regen is kind of handy. Anybody that has auto protect is excellent. And if you absolutely have to have a character actually go down in phase 1, it's not the end of the world. Just make sure you've brought out one of your Phoenix Downers that we're going to talk about in phase 2. So for phase 2, you're going to need at least 2 characters with Auto Phoenix on their armor. Technically, they don't need anything else other than SOS Haste on that armor. But if you aren't going to put break HP limit on that armor, that does mean you have to go inside Sin, get into a random battle, get that character knocked out, revived, and then walk back onto the airship so that you can have them starting the fight in haste. And that's kind of annoying, so I'd recommend putting break HP limit on everybody. It also lets them take a couple hits in phase 1, which is useful, but it's not necessary. Also, while the minimum is 2 users of Auto Phoenix so that they can revive each other, I'd actually recommend having 3. One of which having Auto Regen, Break HP Limit, SOS Haste, and Auto Phoenix as their armor. Because that way you can swap the regenning Auto Phoenix user in and out so that they can heal without being vulnerable to attacks until they're at the point where they can tank an attack. In terms of what else is useful in Phase 2, anybody with Break HP Limit and Auto Regen is really useful. If they have Break HP Limit, Auto Regen, and Auto Protect, that's excellent. I'd recommend having at least 1 character with that combination. I think I had 2. In fact, let's just take a look at the exact setup I used. Now, what I was going for with this was trying to mock up the kind of armors that you might have kicking around at the end of an attack-only playthrough, plus a few that had been made specifically for this fight, because you are going to want to make at least a few armors specifically for this fight. Okay, so what you're going to see is that everybody is in the team and they have their celestial weapons equipped. Most of them don't have an armor equipped though, because I want them to be at half health, so when I equip an armor with break HP limit, I can then heal them up to half. Riku's going to be one of our Auto Phoenix users with an SOS Haste 3-slot armor that's been farmed. Titus is also going to be an Auto Phoenix user with the kind of 4-slot armor you've probably got kicking around. Kamari is also going to be the 3rd Auto Phoenix user, the one that has Auto Regen, so he's going to be really important in Phase 2. Waka is going to have a farmed 3-slot SOS Haste armor with just Auto Regen and Break HP limit. Yuna has our 1 Auto Haste armor with that second best Phase 1 loadout I described earlier. Orin also has Auto Protect, Auto Regen, and Break HP limit on his armor, making him very valuable in Phase 2. And Lulu is going to be our Auto Potion user with that ideal loadout that I described for Phase 1. In terms of stats, almost half the stats, as I mentioned in the last video, are kind of useless in this fight. You don't need evasion, you don't need magic defense. So it's very easy to get all the stats you need maxed out on a standard sphere grid, which is what I've done. One thing I will say is it's kind of a good job this fight doesn't need a lot of resetting, because the amount of menuing needed before the start of the fight is quite enormous. Obviously we're going to need to dump all our potions and high potions. We can't rebuy X potions, so we definitely don't want to use them now. But we're going to need to use up all of our high potions and then rebuy 99 of them multiple times over, just to get everybody from 4/9's health up to half health with break HP limit, to give ourselves as much of a health buffer as possible while maintaining the ability to use haste with SOS haste armors. So that's going to involve a bunch of shopping with Bryn, which I will speed up to spare you the tedium of what's involved in the setup for this fight. I'm also leaving myself with exactly 20 X potions, because I think I saw Dansko 8 had exactly that amount at one point in the post-game, so that's what I'm going with as a reasonable amount for what you may have at this stage of an attack-only playthrough. Okay, so as we first get into the fight, the first thing we're going to have to deal with is the fact that even with all our characters in haste, without access to something like quick hit or overdrives, multi-attacking moves, we don't have enough turns to take out both arms before either one of them gets a turn. This is the one small element of RNG that I mentioned earlier. So we do need to take out Arm 1, because as per last video, Arm 2 has better attacks for us to be able to deal with. So focus on Arm 1 first, and then we would ideally like Arm 2 to use Sloga, or if it attacks one of our characters, that's also not the end of the world. It's a bit of HP loss. It would be kind of good if it attacked Lulu, but as long as it's not Terra Graviton, the run should be a go. As you can see, I've chosen to start with Yuna, Auron, and Lulu up front. Yuna is going to be on the front line for pretty much all of Phase 1. Lulu will be out to take every attack in Phase 1, but before long I'll be switching her out to get extra regen on the characters that need regen, and Auron's pretty handy here too. We'll be seeing a lot of him. Also to note here, we're trying to set up that same rhythm that we had in the last video, so that's 5 attacks on an arm as soon as we can, and then hold that last attack until it's about to take a turn, to maximize the amount of attacks that we can put elsewhere. So you'll see that I've shifted to attacking Arm 2 now that I want Arm 1 to survive for as long as possible, and then take it out at the last minute, and then right after we take out Arm 1, Arm 2 will get its turn, which was always inevitable. And we're ideally hoping for Sloga, definitely not Terra Graviton. And we get Sloga, which means this run is a go. From here on, if you play perfectly, Penance can't beat you. But again, we don't really want to have Arm 1 and Arm 2 up at the same time. So we're only going to put 5 attacks into Arm 2, and then we're going to start chipping away at Penance's body until Arm 2 is about to take a turn. And then if we've set everything up properly, that would mean that we'll knock out Arm 2 right before Arm 1 regenerates, which is what we want to never see Judgment Day. Not so important in Phase 1, it's more about maximizing the number of attacks you can put in the body in Phase 1, but in Phase 2, holding that rhythm is going to be pretty essential to make sure that we never get hit with a Judgment Day, because that's the one thing we can't take. You'll notice here switching in Waka to take this second hit, because Auron's already got some damage on him. Really early on in the fight, it's more about trying to get some damage on a few of my regen crew, so that I can then sort of swap Lulu out for them to get that extra regenning. Lulu doesn't need to be on the front line the whole time, she only needs to be there to take the attacks. And obviously now I've got Auron and Waka, who would quite like to get some of their health back so that they can take more hits later. So I'll swap Lulu out for Auron here just to have maximum healing. And that's honestly all I did for a lot of Phase 1. We can actually speed up here, because all I'm doing is just swapping between those 4, having Yuna, Waka, Auron on the front line for most of the time, and then swapping either Waka or Auron out for Lulu whenever Penance was going to hit us, just so that she can take that hit and throw an X potion, and it'll give Auron and Waka enough time to heal back. And you can hold that sort of pattern with just 4 for a very long time, so I'm going to speed through it. Now obviously your individual makeup is going to look a little different in terms of what armors you're able to put together. Hopefully you'll have at least one auto potion user. They're really useful because they can take hits without needing to be on the front line. If you're stuck for someone like that, potentially just having an auto haste armor with break HP limit and auto protect, if that's something you've got kicking around even without the regen. Like, that's a character that can take 10 hits and doesn't need to be on the front line, taking up space for someone else that could be regenning. So that's potentially a really valuable armor that you could be using here as well. If you're really stuck, don't be afraid to bring out your auto phoenixes here. That's fine too. If they've got SOS haste and break HP limit, then they should be good to take a couple hits. If they've got auto protect in the mix as well, they should be good to take quite a few hits. In fact, before too long, now Auron's getting low, I'm going to bring out Kamari soon, because he is my auto phoenix user that also has regen. So by throwing an extra regen user into the mix, I'm able to keep taking damage from phase 1 in a way that I will eventually be able to heal back from in phase 2, because Penance's total output is actually much lower in phase 2. Each attack does more damage, but it's to one character rather than 3, so we'll actually regen. We'll actually have a net positive regen of health every round in phase 2. So it doesn't, even if you make it to phase 2 really low but alive, that's fine. You can heal it back. Another sort of question that brings up is who gets priority when it comes to being on the front line for healing. As you can see here, I'm prioritizing Oren and Yuna, which I will continue to do for quite a while. That is because they both have auto protect. So they're kind of healing back more damage because they take less, if that makes sense. I guess they need to heal less to be able to take one more attack. Therefore, healing them is better than healing a character that would need to be set on the front line for several rounds just to take one more attack, which is the case for Kimahri and Wakka, who don't have the benefit of auto protect. Now, it's worth saying I've been sort of tallying all my attacks up to this point when I was playing through, so I know we're a few turns from phase 2 here, which is why I'm about to bring out my two main Auto Phoenix users in Tidus and Riku. This is quite a risky time of the fight, where there's kind of a lot to keep track of, so I'm not too worried about doing this perfectly, as it were, and not wasting any resources. It's more about, like, keep it simple, keep everybody safe, have two Auto Phoenix users out until we're settled into phase 2. So that's kind of my thinking there. Worth noting that for the entirety of phase 2, more or less, we're going to want two Auto Phoenix users on the front line for every attack. We can swap them out to let other people have healing, but every time Penance gets an attack, we need to make sure we've lined up at least two Auto Phoenix users to be on the front line, because Penance's attack, like, you might be able to survive one hit, but it inflicts armor break, so the second hit on the same character will always hit for max damage. Everybody is vulnerable, everybody can die in phase 2, so we both need an Auto Phoenix user to cover the one character that we get to have, and then we need another Auto Phoenix user to cover our first Auto Phoenix user in case they die. So for the vast majority of phase 2, we only really get to have sort of one character on the front line that we would like to take an attack that might get a counter attack in, or even potentially survive an attack. The priority at the start of phase 2 is really just to get health back onto your auto regen users and trying to keep the arms in rhythm. As you can see, I messed that up a little bit there. Just depending on where your attack falls and what tick you're on, it is quite easy to let those arms get out of rhythm. And so long as it doesn't happen on Penance's turn, it's usually fine. You can pull it back pretty easily, but paying attention to those pink little rectangles on the top right of your screen is really going to help in terms of maximizing everything. For those of you that know about ticks, it's 12 ticks for an arm to respawn, and then after it respawns, it's another 12 ticks until it takes a turn. So everything can line up nicely, but unfortunately, because we don't have access to quick hit, we can't take a turn every tick. We're stuck with 3 characters, each of which only takes an attack every 4 ticks, so it's possible for things to mess up and get out of alignment. So you just sort of have to watch that, and if you can't kill an arm perfectly on the very last tick, then you need to bear that in mind when you're killing the next arm. Like, if you kill one arm, if you're forced to kill one arm, say 2 ticks early, then you probably want to kill that next arm 2 ticks early if you have an attack on that tick, just to keep everything perfectly in rhythm. As you can see now, a lot of our characters have healed up. Oren's sat on a healthy 24k, so he can very much take a hit at this point, and I could even swap him out to give other people extra healing if that's necessary. But for now, it's really just a case of hoping Penance hits Oren with an attack. The reason I'm keeping Oren on the front line for all of his attacks rather than Yuna is because Orin has counterattack, so Orin's kind of the number one choice right now, but Yuna's a close second because she also has auto protect, meaning she needs way less time on the front lines to get regened to a point where she could survive an attack. It's worth noting, as Orin takes this attack and throws out his counterattack, that nobody will ever be able to take 2 attacks in a row in this phase. Orin is now armor broken, so even though it looks like he might have the health to take a second hit, he absolutely can't. And he's actually going to be prioritized on the front lines, taking attacks, in the hopes that he'll get killed quickly, and then can have a Phoenix down thrown at him, and then be in a position to heal up, get hit again, survive it, counterattack. Did I mention phase 2 is quite tedious? There's a lot of dying for not a lot of surviving, and you get basically no damage on the Penance's body if everybody's busy reviving. Because of the way this fight's set up with everybody at max agility and in haste status, what that means is we'll all get turns 4 ticks after making an attack, but if we die and are revived, we won't get a turn until 9 ticks after we're revived. So dying is very inefficient in terms of damage output. Now, you'll notice we've managed to get Kimahri all the way back up to a point that even though he doesn't have auto protect, he could take a hit. Now, what that allows us to do is actually throw out just Kimahri with 2 people we'd quite like to get attacked, let's say Orin and Yuna, for example, because we know Kimahri can survive. He doesn't need another Auto Phoenix user to cover him. So that's kind of where Kimahri's value really shines. Unfortunately here, he gets hit straight away, so now I'm kind of hoping he gets it a second time so he can die, get revived, and heal all the way back up to the point that it'll allow me to have 2 of my auto regeners, or just any 2 people that I would quite like to get attacked and either, you know, dying and lose their break, or because they're in a position where they've healed up to the point that they can actually take a hit now and counter and get the extra turns. Yeah, it's worth considering the priority there. Obviously, getting heals on Kimahri is really big because he's the Auto Phoenix user, so he can have more people on the front lines when he's in a good state. But I think it's probably more valuable to get healing on people with Auto Protect, because that healing's so much more valuable. They need far less healing to be able to take 1 more hit. So I tend to prioritize healing on Yuna, and in particular Orin, because Orin also has counterattack, which is another big factor. Like, we get surprisingly few hits on Penance's body for how long this fight's dragging on. So yeah, a counterattack can go a really long way. Now, there are a few things we need to watch out for in Phase 2 with our auto regeners in particular. Since most of them have SOS haste on their armor, it's entirely possible, if they get too much time on the front lines without being attacked, for them to regen all the way out of SOS haste. And that would be a big problem because, as mentioned at the start, everybody needs to be in haste for this fight, or else we don't get enough damage output to keep both arms down, and Penance is going to use Judgment Day against us. So we need to stay in haste, so we can't heal too much. You might think that would be solved by having SOS haste paired with SOS regen, but annoyingly it'll regen you just out of SOS, and therefore you will lose your haste regardless. So whether it's SOS regen or auto regen, you've got to be paying careful attention to not giving anybody too much time on the front lines. That's quite easy for people like Orin and Yuna, who have auto protect as well, but for the Kimahris and the Wakas, who have SOS haste, auto regen, and no auto protect, it's kind of a narrow band of health that you kind of want to keep them in, where they can take a hit, but they're not in danger of regenning out of their SOS haste. Now, if you turn your attention to the top right of your screen, you'll notice that Riku is the only person who's going to get an attack between Penance's attack and Arm 1's attack, which is the situation that caused us an awful lot of trouble in the last video. Fortunately, we have some counterplay now. If we switch someone who can take an attack into Riku's position, let's say Waka in this situation, then we can move the other two Auto Phoenix users into the other two spaces. And that means if Penance does attack the person who's going to get an attack between Penance and the Arm's turn, then we know they can survive. In this case, he doesn't attack that position. But if he had done, we'd have been perfectly safe. There's no chance of the Arm getting a turn. So if you're careful and you watch out for those, that's a situation that's now much safer than it used to be. We don't have to risk upsetting our rhythm, and we don't have to risk taking an arm attack. We can comfortably avoid both by being careful with our switching. Now you'll notice that we've actually managed to get Kimahri back to something resembling healthy health, and he can probably take a hit here, which gives us that excellent situation where we can bring out two people that we'd like to take a hit, in this case Auron and Waka, and hopefully one of them does. As you can see there, Auron, who was already broken, goes down. Kimahri's able to heal him perfectly safely because he would have been able to take the hit if it had come for him, so we don't need to have a second Auto Phoenix user out. And then this time we go for Kimahri, Waka, and Yuna, which is kind of an interesting combination because all of them could take the hit there. In that case, it went to Kimahri, which is kind of annoying. But that's kind of the other play you can do. In those cases, it doesn't have to be Kimahri. If we'd had, say, Auron, Yuna, and Waka all sort of line up in a situation where they could all definitely take a hit at the same time, I could throw all three of them out on the front line and guarantee myself a round where somebody survives, potentially gets a counterattack in when we get 2 or 3 extra turns to hit Penance's body with, rather than the usual kind of crapshoot where it's 2 Auto Phoenix users plus 1 person that I'd quite like to get attacked in, and I just have that 1 in 3 chance every time. Although, to be fair, it's probably worth stating, it is perfectly possible to do the second phase of Penance with just 2 Auto Phoenix users and 1 character with Auto Regen and Auto Protect. And that's really all you need, as long as everybody's hasted. 1 Auto Regen user with Auto Protect is all you strictly need to get through Phase 2. So if you're really struggling in terms of what armors you can put together, focus on Phase 1. Phase 2 will be fine. It'll be nicer if you can have more people that'll be useful to you in Phase 2, but if you need to prioritize Phase 1. Phase 1's the phase that can go wrong. Phase 2, as long as you play right, will be fine. You might use a lot more Phoenix Downs. You might even come close on Phoenix Downs. I think in the last video I had about 20 left at the end of the fight, which means I used really most of them. But yeah, it also isn't like I was like 1 or 2 away, and it could have gone the other way. Like 20's comfortable-ish. Now, I wonder if you can maybe tell that we're getting to the end of Phase 2, or at least settled quite comfortably into Phase 2, seeing as already Kimahri has healed back to almost 30k, which is about the breakpoint where he could survive an attack. Which just sort of goes to show that the longer you spend in Phase 2, the more health you'll have built up, and honestly, overhealing does become a bit of a worry. And if you need to swap in a character like Lulu, one of your auto potion users, just to be sure you don't overheal on any of your auto regen users, like, that's fine, do that. Do be careful, but obviously when it's Kimahri that's doing it, who's our Auto Phoenix user, that's what we want, because then we can throw more of our characters out on the front line. And honestly, like, Phase 2 really does get better the longer you're in this fight, because typically you'll get into the phase just barely, having just made it through phase 1 with everybody super low because everybody was getting hit. And then you're sort of scrapping around to try and recover at first. But before too long, you'll find like you've got all the health you want, really. And it's just a case of, well, so-and-so's broken, so I kind of need them to get killed before they can be useful again. But then once they're ready to start healing, they can get all the frontline time they need. And as you can see, we're actually getting really lucky here with Kimahri not getting hit after a couple of, I guess, bad RNG sections where we spent a lot of time healing up Kimahri, and only for him to get attacked pretty quickly. He's now dodged, is that 4 or 5 in a row? Just allowing us to get huge damage down. Because every attack, that's either somebody who got extra turns and got extra attacks down, or it's somebody that was broken and needed to die dying so that they can come back and heal up and get extra turns in the future. So really nice section here where I'm actually having to swap Kimahri out quite a lot just to make sure he doesn't overheal. Anybody that gets to 40k is starting to make me nervous, and maybe I'm going to think about not using them. So yeah, kind of getting to the point where I'm at a little bit hoping Kimahri does take a hit before too long, because if he does wind up healing out of haste range, then I can't bring him in. He's got to swap out and stay out, and he's getting closer and closer to that. But yeah, fortunately, before it gets too desperate, he does wind up taking the attack, and kind of the nice period of getting extra turns almost every round is gone, and now we're hoping Kimahri sort of dies as quickly as possible to get that break off him so he can then start healing back up. But again, because we're late into phase 2, it probably won't take too long for him to heal back up. I guess you're picking up that I'm really keen that you should have a 3 auto Phoenix with 1 with auto regen type setup, because it really does speed up phase 2. It's hard to overstate just how little damage you're gonna do to Penance's body in phase 2 if somebody is dying every round. In fact, like, I tried that pretty early on when I was trying to do attack-only Penance, and if somebody's dying every round, yeah, you'll get some hits, but you will run out of Phoenix Downs before you take even half his health. So yeah, that's a really long, horrible fight. Don't do that to yourself. Make sure that you've got the kind of team that's going to get some attacks as often as possible, because every extra attack that we get in this phase is an attack that we can hit Penance with, because the arms need so much attention and we have to give it to them, and it's only what's extra that we can hit Penance with, if that makes sense. I think I'm rambling, so I'm gonna stop doing that, and instead, just as the latter half of this fight plays out, I'm gonna do a quick plug for my Twitch channel. I'm currently doing my first No Sphere Grid playthrough of Final Fantasy X over on Twitch. That's streaming 6 p.m. BST on Sundays and Tuesdays. We're currently up to Operation Mihen, and I'm already feeling it. I thought you could get through the early sections fairly alright, No Sphere Grid, because your level wouldn't be that far away from what it would otherwise have been, but nah, stuff's outspeeding us and almost one-shotting us already, so that's interesting. I am using Aeons. I think most of the time it's no summoning, but I kind of like how it affects the story, or like the feel of the story, to allow summoning in a No Sphere Grid. You really feel when you don't have access to Yuna, and obviously you lose access to Yuna quite a bit in Final Fantasy X. So you really feel it when you don't have your summoner there, which is a nice element. I'm also not using any kind of cutscene skipper or anything like that, so it's a full story playthrough, if you like, and I'm going to see how far into the post-game I can get. That's another good reason to allow summons, actually, because if you want to get really deep into the post-game in no sphere grid, I imagine you have to rely on Aeons more and more and more. So I'm trying to learn all the tricks of Aeon's no sphere grid now, so that when I get to the post-game, I know what I'm doing. And yeah, hopefully I'll be able to figure out a way past most of the monster arena, all the dark Aeons, particularly Dark Anima. Right? Like, obviously that's a really famous, difficult fight. I've been going out of my way to avoid any guides in terms of how to go about beating them no sphere grid. So maybe I'll come up with a new way to beat a couple of things. And if I can get past all of the Dark Aeons, I'm even going to have a crack at Penance. I'd really like to have a good go at beating Penance no sphere grid. I understand it's very likely impossible. It's been tried by a bunch of smart people before, but you know, I'd like to play around with it and see what I can do. Maybe get past phase 1 or something, or maybe even just prove that it's theoretically possible with perfect luck, like by kind of trying to cheese your way through it with state saves. Obviously that doesn't count as a real victory, but you know, it's something. So yeah, we're having a lot of fun with that. If you're watching this video anywhere near when it came out, comes up by the stream and say hi, it's gonna be months and months and months to get through all the content that I want to get through. So yeah, it's probably, if as you're watching this video, I'm probably still at it. Come say hi. So if you're looking at how long's left in the video, you can probably tell we're starting to get towards the end of the fight, and obviously I when I was playing through, knew that as well. I was keeping a tally of absolutely every attack I made, who I put in. Also, you know, keeping track of who's armor broken and all that. There was a lot of making little notes on my little pad as I was doing this fight. But yeah, I think I'm starting to become aware that I'm getting really close to the end, and maybe getting a little nervous as well. You'll see coming up that I wind up getting really paranoid about Kimahri. So even though I've been having him on the front lines for quite a while, like the little gremlins get to me, and I'm like, is he armor broken though? Is he armor broken? I'm sure he's not been attacked, but has he? So I pulled the same trick that I pulled in the last video, and just dip into the items menu, and hover over something that'll show everybody's statuses, just to check, just to be sure, because we're getting so close to the end here that Kimahri's actually okay, and I'm safe to leave him on the front lines. It also gets really tempting as you get sort of into the really late stages of the fight, when you can, especially if you're tracking, if you're keeping tabs on everything, and you know you're like 10 hits on the body away from winning, or maybe even 5, to just be like, I could just rush him. Fortunately, I stay strong and don't go for that strategy, because obviously it's hugely risky. It's cost me it cost me a run, not this run, but a different run earlier that I did, just deciding to rush it, and then you know, you don't quite get as many hits in as you wanted, and then the other arm spawned because you weren't attacking the arm that was up, and then you get hit by Judgment Day, and then you die, and that's bad. Also, as you get towards the end of the fight, you're hoping more and more and more that Penance's attacks are going to land on someone who can take it, like Heroin takes one, and then he gets a counter-attack in, and that's going to mean in a few minutes we can get probably 3 extra attacks down on the body that we wouldn't have otherwise had, so that's like 4 out of very few attacks at this point that we need. So it's when you're in the final few minutes of the fight, every attack on someone that can really take it is huge, and it's also tempting to switch in like Lulu, because you know she can take one, and things like that. I don't do that here. Fortunately, I resist even doing that, but it's tempting. I can tell you, it's really tempting when you're this close. especially when he, you know, attacks Titus, and that means I'm probably only going to get, you know, one hit on the body over the next minute, which is not going to be enough. But yeah, as you can see in this final section, I'm just trying to get sort of Kimahri killed so that he can heal back up. Maybe that'll be useful, but it's probably too far off, honestly. I really hope the battle will be done before that becomes necessary. And I think pretty soon Oren's going to get hit. Is it this one? Yeah. Yeah, so now Oren is sort of ready to die again and heal back up, but rather than go for that, I think what I wind up doing is putting Waka in his place, because I know that it's probably if Waka takes the attack here, that could be the end of it. But unfortunately, Penance insists on attacking my two Auto Phoenix users, and obviously that really slows the damage down that we're able to put on the body. If we look here, we got one attack on him. And he's obviously still insisting on attacking Auto Phoenix users, so I'm trying to get Kimahri back up because that'll improve my odds, but hopefully won't be necessary. But yeah, Penance is just not playing ball. I think I'm maybe 2 or 3 attacks away at this point. But because I've just been tallying, it's not like I've got a scan. I'm not certain, so I don't want to risk anything. But I do know I'm for sure really, really close. But yeah, then eventually he does wind up attacking Waka, and he actually dies to the counter attack, which is brilliant. So yeah, if you're into that kind of thing, Penance attack only, if you allow character switching, is not only very possible, but dare I say, actually kind of fun. It's a long fight, and there's a lot of things you need to pay attention to in terms of who's in for healing, who's on the front line when Penance is going to be attacking. Are the arms in rhythm? Yeah, there's a lot to think about, and like this took like 2 hours, I think, of real time when I was playing through it. But it's possible, and if you're into that kind of thing, it is really fun. So yeah, if we take a quick look at the items, you can see we have 7 X potions left, so we used 13, and we have half our Phoenix Downs left, which is like actually really comfortable. You can see there's a lot of wiggle room there in phase 2. If you really need it, if you're really tight on what you've got in terms of armors and stuff, you can focus on phase 1. Phase 2 is quite comfortable. But yeah, thank you to everybody who made it to the end of this video. I'm sure it won't be all that long until I decide to do something stupid like this again. And free Palestine.